A mystery that cannot be explained. An enigma that defies reason. A surprising and unexpected answer. To encounter such a mystery firsthand may change your life forever. Face to face with the greatest riddles of the ages, the world's most profound mysteries reach out and touch your life in ways you never imagined possible. Extreme Mysteries.
In 1967, the tiny nation of Israel achieved one of the most stunning military victories of all time. During a war that lasted just 6 days, Israel fought on 3 fronts and overcame enemy forces that outnumbered its troops by a 2-to-1 margin. Leaders of the Jewish state claimed the victory was a result of superior military planning. But is there more to the story? Was there something going on behind the scenes of the Six-Day War? Something that tipped the scales in Israel's favor? Could it be, as the Arabs claimed, that their defeat was accomplished only with the intervention by the Americans? How was such a miraculous victory possible? Did the Soviet Union and the United States come to the brink of nuclear war? And is the present turmoil in the Middle East setting the stage for history to repeat itself? Are there ancient writings that supposedly predicted Israel's victory in the war? If they do exist, what other secrets might they reveal about Israel's future and the future of the human race? How did Israel win the Six-Day War? Was it a military marvel or a miracle? Jerusalem. The 6,000-year-old city on a hill that is the spiritual home to 3 major world religions. Christians, Muslims, and Jews attempt to coexist here. And in spite of this, or perhaps because of it, Jerusalem has almost never known peace. And so, it may seem strange to wonder about the significance of one confrontation that happened more than 30 years ago. But the Six-Day War was much more than just another conflict in a long string of battles. There was a lot more at stake in the Six-Day War than just the security of Israel, though. New evidence has come to light that reveals that the Soviet Union planned to invade Israel to help the Arabs. When Washington found out, they threatened to retaliate. In other words, we came awfully close to World War III.
Israel's win over the Arab forces was so swift and so complete that it left the world to wonder how could a country the size of New Jersey win a war against the Arab armies that were backed by the Soviet Union and do it within such a short time. It seemed at the time impossible.
There was a lot more at stake during the Six-Day War than just the security of Israel. The evidence has revealed that the Soviet Union had prepared plans to invade Israel as a part of its help to the Arab states. And such an invasion was prepared with the full understanding that it could lead to a major military clash between the Soviet Union and the United States, which itself could result in the nuclear war.
Whatever was happening on the political scene, the most fascinating thing about the Six-Day War was that it was predicted in the Bible thousands of years ago. And it happened just as it was predicted.
There are many questions that beg for answers, and the more we delve into the history of the conflict, the more unexplained events come to the surface. Events that seem to be working in Israel's favor, like the strange circumstances surrounding Israel's first airstrike against Egypt.
The Israeli Air Force destroyed in a matter of hours 11 Egyptian air bases and most of the Egyptian Air Force. One should remember that with 4 Egyptian bases in Sinai, the Egyptian MiGs could be over the skies of Tel Aviv within a matter of 7 minutes.
Israel's surprise attack against Egypt was so successful, some military analysts say that the war was actually won in the first few hours. And yet, Egyptian air power was significantly greater than that of the Jewish state. So how did Israel pull it off?
Israel had planned a brilliant raid, which, if successful, would virtually assure them victory. They timed the attack so that all the 11 air bases would be hit at the same time. The raid was an unqualified success that made it impossible for the Egyptian Air Force to menace any city in Israel.
Most historians will tell you that Israel's success in the Six-Day War was due largely in part to the first airstrike. But the success of that attack hinged on an unexplained event, part of the miracle of the Six-Day War. The Israelis conducted the raid early in the morning, around 8 a.m. The Israelis anticipated that the Egyptians would be having tea at that hour, so they wouldn't be expecting an attack. But just in case they were wrong, Israeli jets flew in low over the Mediterranean Sea to avoid the enemy radar. At that point, the Egyptians should have detected the enemy fighters, but they didn't. Nothing happened. The Israelis were amazed, but continued on their mission to the air bases in Egypt. There they received another shock. There before them were all the enemy planes assembled for takeoff, neatly lined up in rows on the tarmac as if they were waiting to be destroyed. The Israelis wasted no time in taking advantage of the situation. They totally destroyed the Soviet-made fighter planes and bombers that should have been the biggest obstacle in winning the war.
So why didn't the Egyptians react? Even if the Israelis had avoided radar detection, their jets were visible to the naked eye. The flight path even took some of the planes directly over major landmarks like the Sphinx. So why wasn't the alarm sounded? General Mordecai Hod, commanding general of the Air Force, said, 16 years planning had gone into these initial 80 minutes. We lived with the plan, we slept on the plan, we ate the plan. Constantly, we perfected it.
Well, the quality of an armed force is a function of planning and of execution. And as it turned out, both the planning and the execution were just right.
Was the Israeli attack plan so perfectly executed that the Egyptians were unable to mount a defense against the onslaught?
The reason the Egyptian Air Force wasn't prepared for an airstrike is they were ready to launch their own airstrike, and they were in having a victory breakfast. This was to be a huge party celebrating the annihilation of Israel. And they got caught with their planes on the ground.
And even if they could not defend themselves, the Egyptians could have alerted their Arab allies so that a counterattack against Israel could have been launched. But they didn't. Many experts say that the outcome of the war would have been different if the Arabs had reacted in time. So why did the Egyptians remain silent?
During the Egyptian airstrike, only 12 fighting aircraft were left at Israel's Tel Aviv air bases. This left them extremely vulnerable. If Egypt's Arab allies had counterattacked, they would have been finished.
And yet, nothing happened. Why? Strange as it seems, the answer may lie in the roots of an ancient conflict.
Actually, the Jews and the Arabs are cousins. The founder of the Jewish people, Abraham, had two sons. One was Isaac, and the other was Ishmael. Isaac, who continued the Jewish line, Ishmael, who began the Arab line. And the fact also is that God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars of the sky. He also promised that the land stretching from the Sinai desert north and east to the Euphrates River would belong to his descendants. But this was at the end of the days, in God's good time. It is absolutely forbidden for the Jews, the Israelites themselves, to force innocent people out of their homeland. Abraham questioned how it was possible for him and his wife Sarah, both beyond childbearing age, to have a son. But there is one guarantee and only one guarantee. It's called a covenant that God makes with the Jewish people. And that is that we will continue into history and never be destroyed. Therefore, God does the impossible biologically, and Abraham and Sarah have an heir.
God's plan as related in the biblical text is pretty straightforward. But problems arose when Sarah, Abraham's wife, doubted God's ability to give her a son. So she gave Hagar, her maidservant, to Abraham. and she bore him a son named Ishmael. He is the ancestor of the Arabs. Several years later, God did fulfill his promise, and Sarah herself gave birth to a son, whom she named Isaac. Now, according to the Bible, this was the child through whom God promised to fulfill his covenant, and who became the ancestor of the Jews. The Bible predicted that there would be a continuing conflict between the Arabs and the Jews. In Genesis 16:12, we find this ominous prophecy concerning Ishmael's descendants, the Arabs. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. I think there's no doubt this prophecy has been and is still being fulfilled.
Thus the conflict between Jew and Arab was born, and it continues even to this day. So who is the rightful owner of the land God promised to the descendants of Abraham? The Arabs insist that the birthright belongs to them. The Jews make the same claim. But the Arabs have taken the argument a step further.